Before we dive into the coaching talk, I need to point out something wild from that Steelers game. Remember how Donnell Washington tore through the Bengals secondary like it was nothing? Geno Stone, the safeties, nobody could slow him down. Well, here's the crazy part, everyone online lists him at 265 pounds, but on Amon-Ra St. Brown's podcast, the man straight up said he's 311 pounds at 6 feet 7 inches. That's not a tight end, that's a freight train wearing football pads. No player that size should be able to move with that kind of speed. No wonder he looked like an extra offensive lineman bulldozing through the field. Anyway, that brings us to the real conversation, and Bengals fans, this is where things get serious. We're talking top head coaching candidates if Cincinnati decides to part ways with Zac Taylor. And honestly, I hate the word if. That word drains the energy out of the entire discussion. When you've watched the same issues over and over, if starts to feel like denial. I'm not here for if. I'm here for when. But before we break down these coaching names, before listening to the latest news, subscribe to the channel, like it, and don't forget to press the bell icon. Let's move on to the new news. Alright, now let's get into it. Starting with an honorable mention, a name Bengals fans already know well, Lou Anarumo. Now let's get into some of the coaching names that keep popping up, and yeah, a few of them might surprise Bengals fans. John Gruden is a name that always sparks debate. Do I think Cincinnati would seriously consider him? Maybe. Would I personally love the idea? Not really. His track record off the field brings more noise than stability, and the Bengals don't need any extra distractions right now. The only reason his name even stays in the conversation is because of his long NFL history, but history alone doesn't win games in today's league. A much more realistic candidate would be someone like Brian Flores, currently operating as a defensive coordinator. And here's something Bengals fans need to understand, nearly every coaching candidate being floated right now is defensive-minded. That trend isn't random. It's intentional. A defensive head coach could bring two major strengths to Cincinnati: better defensive drafting, something this roster desperately needs as the core ages and the depth thins out. Stronger defensive structure, especially for a unit that has talent but still struggles with consistency. But let's be honest, the Bengals' defensive issues aren't purely about coaching. There's a player problem that any new coach, defensive or not, will have to navigate. Scheme can help, leadership can help, but ultimately this team needs upgrades on the field more than it needs someone new wearing the headset. Whoever Cincinnati brings in, if they actually make the move, the real question will be whether a defensive-minded leader can elevate a defense that has been far too unreliable in crucial moments. If the Bengals do move toward a defensive-minded head coach, the next question becomes, what happens to Old Golden? In theory, he could stay, but his role would never be the same. Any defensive specialist who takes the top job is going to want real authority over the defensive structure. No head coach built on defense is coming to Cincinnati just to hand over the one thing they're elite at. And honestly, you wouldn't want them to. If you hire someone like Brian Flores, you want him shaping the defense from top to bottom. That's literally why you'd bring him in. Then there are other names that keep resurfacing in Bengals discussions. Robert Saleh, formerly with the 49ers and Jets, was talked about last year when fans were debating whether Zac Taylor's time might be up. His energy, his defensive intensity, and his culture-building traits all make him an interesting possibility if he hits the market. Shane Steichen from the Colts is a different kind of consideration. Not a defensive guy, but someone known for smart offense and QB development. Still, it feels unlikely the Bengals would snag him unless a dramatic shakeup happened in Indianapolis. Another name floating around is Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator for the Chargers. Young, sharp, and respected, someone who could bring a modern defensive approach that Cincinnati desperately needs. And before we move on, let's clear up the Gruden point once and for all. Yes, he's technically a defensive-leaning coach, and yes, his name gets thrown into the mix from time to time, but the off-field controversies make him far from an ideal fit. The Bengals need leadership, not extra headlines. Moving deeper into the list, another name that comes up is Kurt from Indiana. A college coach jumping to the NFL isn't shocking, it happens every cycle, and it'll keep happening as long as teams believe they can find the next breakout strategist at the college level. Jeff Hafley, the Packers' defensive coordinator, is another defensive candidate who fits the current trend. And yes, if you're noticing a pattern here, you're absolutely right. The Bengals' entire coaching conversation continues to circle around defensive minds. Every name that rises to the surface seems to come from that side of the ball. Then there's Steve Spagnuolo, or Spags. Adding him to the mix would instantly bring experience and championship DNA. And honestly, it would be pretty satisfying to see him land somewhere with stability after years of bouncing around the league. Vance Joseph from Denver is another established defensive option. Each of these coaches brings something different, but all of them share that defensive-first identity, which says a lot about what Cincinnati might be prioritizing behind the scenes. Now, let's shift to the rare offensive names on the list, Joe Brady and Cliff Kingsbury. These are the only two offensive coaches mentioned so far, and they highlight the Bengals' biggest issue. If Zac Taylor is let go, Cincinnati does not currently have a true offensive coordinator. Dan Pitcher isn't ready to command an entire offense at the NFL level, and the Bengals would need someone with real experience designing and calling plays. This is why hiring an offensive-minded head coach would actually solve two problems at once. Instead of needing both a new head coach and a new offensive coordinator, you get a leader who can build the offense himself while also shaping the staff around him. It's the more streamlined solution, and arguably the one that would help Joe Burrow the most. There are two ways to look at this coaching situation. If the Bengals hire a defensive-minded head coach, the expectation is simple: the defense should improve immediately. A coach with a defensive background should be able to identify the right personnel, fix the weak spots, and reshape a unit that has been inconsistent all season. In theory, it's a straightforward upgrade. But here's the real truth: Cincinnati needs more than just a coaching tweak. At this point, it feels like the entire direction of the franchise needs a reset. The motto for many fans has become, anyone but Zac. Not because of dislike, but because the team desperately needs a fresh voice, a new identity, and someone who can actually unlock the potential that keeps getting wasted. And it won't be easy. If the Bengals truly want change, it won't stop at the head coach. Duke Tobin's role would need to be evaluated as well. The front office has held on to the same structure for years, and that stability has become stagnation. Even Katie Blackburn's influence over operations would need adjusting if the organization decided to take a new path. This is what makes the upcoming decision so challenging. A coaching change alone won't solve everything. Cincinnati must decide whether it's ready to reshape leadership from top to bottom. Only then can this team finally move in a direction that matches the talent on the field.